Welcome to another Blue Room Weekly, and this week I've got with me John Wharton and Adam Sutton, and it's been a fantastic week to be an Evertonian, fantastic week to round off before we head into the international break. And a bit of a shame we've got international football coming up, because I think after the last couple of results we all would have really looked forward to seeing Everton play again, but we do have to wait a week. But we've still got plenty to talk about here on the show tonight. And one of the things I do want to talk about, and if I come to you first, John, on this, is the transfer window obviously closed this week. Everton did add another signing in Merlin Rowe. But overall, generally, I mean, I was listening to the lads on the byline saying that, it wasn't perfect, the transfer window, but it was still a very, very good window. Overall, what's your feelings on it? Good one for Everton, or still should have added maybe more to it?
I think it's a good one. Yeah, it's 8 out of 10 for me. It's a solid transitional transfer window for us. We had such a lot to do, and it's quite a unique situation, I think, in Premier League history. It's a whole new ownership, whole new management structure, whole new transfer team coming in. So, as well as losing, 11, 12 players. So I think it's never been seen before. So I think what the club have done, they've brought in enough players to give us the right balance for the team. But also, we haven't gone and done what we've done previously, which is just brought in players for the sake of it and wasting like transfer money and wages on the PSRs thing and that. So I think it's a solid window for us. And I think it shows a good sign that for the first time in a long time, Everton seem to have a strategy to how they want to be. Now Moyes is back. We've got that identity. We seem to have more of an identity than we have. You asked me what Everton's identity was over the last 12, 13 years, and I couldn't tell you, other than it was absolutely, in football terms, insane. There was no strategy, there was no leadership really there. So I think with Moyes and with the Freakins, what they're doing, they seem to be bringing back that sense of identity and a sense of leadership and ownership as well in terms of how we do things.
I think, Adam, that obviously talk will be about the much coveted right-back position that we've still not managed to sign and replace. And I think obviously as well that I'll certainly be hoping that from the minute that transfer window closed, that the recruitment team will be sitting down and looking for a Jessica Gay's replacement as well, because obviously he won't be able to go on forever, and we need to get him replaced really when he does pack it in and call it a day. But just same question to you really. I mean, other than the spots that we maybe could have improved on in the final days, what's your assessment of the transfer window overall?
Yeah, I think much the same as John, really, in terms of you can't have everything in one window, and therefore the recruitment team have probably gone for players that they want necessarily. That makes sense. In years gone by, we have maybe panic bought for positions or managers or certain situations we've found ourselves in. And I feel like with Everton, they've got enough of a foundation now to be able to get by. And I think getting by is probably doing us a bit of an understatement, really, because we're doing a lot more than getting by at the moment. But you don't want players after 3-4 years who have got no sell-on value or on big wages. And again, you find yourself in a position where you've got PSR knocking at the door because you've let players run down a contract and you're making losses on all of them, really. So I think there's been a nice mix, actually, in terms of those signings for the here and now. Your Jack Grealishes of the world, and a few others, actually, I think, who are ready to go. And then your Adam Asnews and Tieno Barry and Tyler Diblin can probably be bandied in with them, really, for the future. If they succeed at Everton, then brilliant. If they succeed at Everton and then want to go elsewhere, then you're going to make a pretty penny on them, aren't you? So, yeah, similar to John, I think an 8 out of 10, of course. The right-back position, of course, maybe another defensive midfielder and possibly a 9. But you don't want to be spending silly money across the summer to then be able to, in January, thinking, well, this hasn't worked or that hasn't worked. So, yeah, I'm happy. And the results are always going to make everyone feel a little bit better, aren't they, to be honest?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the point you've made there about the mix of signings, I mean, I think Moyes has probably been one of them managers who's been accused of wanting Premier League ready players and players for now and players with experience. And I know at the start of the window, or when we started making signings at the beginning of the summer, we were of course linked with all the West Ham former West Ham players he had, and obviously Souček we made the late inquiry for, I know, because Moyes would have liked to have had him in, and then we got, as we said, Merlin Rowling. But I think looking at the business we have done, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a healthy mix of experience that's ready to go into the team now, which Jack Grealish, for instance, has shown, but also those players who you mentioned, Adam, who could have that sell-on value going down the road. I mean, we've all heard that Tyler Diblin could potentially be something really special. So if down the years he does turn into that player, we know we're going to either have a fantastic player on our hands, or I don't want to sell him before he's even played the game for us. But if it does, forward planning and forward thinking would suggest that if he does become that player, we'll sell him for huge profits. And something that Everton's not always done is that more forward thinking style of transfer and adopting a transfer or recruitment system. I think, John, though, obviously we talk about it and we say that, Jack Grealish, rightly so, has got, or is going to get all the plaudits and all the headlines. He was named today as one of the candidates for Player of the Month for the first month of the Premier League, and voting's underway in that. And hopefully, Grealish will get what he deserves, what we all think he should, deserves, and gets that Player of the Month award. But I know there's a couple of signings in particular that you think as well who've been your favourite signings in the window, and I know you, in that respect, you're a big fan of Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall already.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we finally got a midfielder in the centre who can bring the ball forward, and it's the same with Merlin Rowell as well. He looks like a midfielder who can take the ball and bring it. You've seen some of the stuff on YouTube where he can actually get the ball forward. He's got those long legs, moving forward, keep possession. And we had that to an extent with Decore, but Decore was only ever 2 steps away from falling over his own feet, wasn't he? And these two seem a bit more graceful than he is. And Dewsbury-Hall's use of the ball, his runs, like for the 3rd goal against Wolves on Saturday, everyone, and rightly so, are focusing on Jack Grealish's his little chip pass to Dewsbury-Hall. But Dewsbury-Hall's run, he ran from the right centre of the pitch, a diagonal run to the left corner of the box. And we haven't seen a midfielder do that properly for a while in an Everton shirt. So to see that, and to see that his first thought is to look up and get forward, I think that's something we really have missed, and something we're really going to be able to exploit, especially with the likes of Ndiaye and Grealish on the wings.
I'm just going to say that. Sorry, Warren. I'm just going to jump in and say that it feels like for the first time in a long time we've got vast amounts of quality all over the pitch, really, and that's only going to hopefully improve the players that haven't just signed in this window but have been at Everton for a couple of years, really. And again, I've seen a lot of talk about James Garner at the start of the season, and I'm a big fan of James Garner. I think he's one of those players, I think I mentioned it to you last time, Warren, didn't I, on the weekly, where he's technically brilliant, but then sometimes he's looking up and he's got people running here, there and everywhere with no real plan. And therefore, your Dewsbury-Halls and Jack Grealish and Iliman Ndiaye of the world are now giving almost like another level of quality for James Garner to not have to do too much, to do what he's good at, get the ball deep, give it into one of those creative players. And we look frightening going forward. And yeah, I mentioned it in one of the group chats I'm in. It looks like when we got on the ball, we might score, which is quite alien to Evertonians, really, isn't it? So it's a nice thing to do where you, again, watching the game, watching the highlights, and you've got that ability to essentially create chances out of nothing. And that's what Jack Grealish and Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall did on the weekend, really. So really exciting across the board.
Yeah, I think what we're saying there is
just coming back to your point that you've made, obviously about the quality around. I know we've had this discussion, me and you, Adam, regarding James Garner, because I've often said on this show and on all the Blue Room shows that for me, I always wanted them to do that little bit more. I always wanted him to take the game by the scruff of the neck. I felt that he went missing sometimes in games, and whilst he would do things neat and tidy, I wanted more out of it, a central midfielder, or certainly a central midfielder that is playing in the Premier League. And I think you're absolutely right. And maybe in the past under different systems and having different players around him, he's maybe not been afforded the responsibility, or maybe not being able to show us what he can fully do because he can't trust maybe the players around him. Whereas now, as you say, having that little bit of quality to go with it is absolutely amazing. And if I just come back to you very quickly, Adam, about we were talking about Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall there. I mean, John's eloquently said there before about the way he gets into certain spaces and positions that we've not had a midfielder to do that. And I think that in football in circles, Dewsbury Hall was always mentioned as could do stuff with the ball and be very intelligent in certain situations. For me, the second goal, I believe it was, where he's done that little reverse pass with Grealish, and Grealish has done the reverse pass to him, and just having that intelligence to make that run into the box. And then obviously, how many times down the years have we seen Everton players get in threatening positions only for it to fall apart? But he plays a lovely ball just into that danger zone, not to anyone in particular. You know, and Iliman Ndiaye's using his goal scoring sort of proactivity, if you like, to get in that position to score the goal. Just a word on the quality of Kiernan Dewsbury Hall and what you think he's brought to this Everton side in these early games.
Well, that's it. I think, again, we've made a real coup with his signing because he's a quality player playing in a side that obviously he's surplus to requirements in at Chelsea, and again, world champions, whatever you want to call them. They've signed about 350 players in this window, never mind in the past couple. So one man's trash is another man's treasure, but he's definitely not trash. I'll tell you that. He's a player that has got bags of quality. I thought he was really good at Leicester. Granted, it was in the Championship at the time, but he's basically got them promoted pretty much by himself when he was there. And a big thing for me, Warren, is that Everton are scoring goals that look the same, which we've never really done. We just seem to score randomly. When we did score in previous years, it'd be a totally different pump into the box that would get flicked on or nodded down, and someone would be there to tap it in, which is fine when it's in random spurts. But at the same time, if you look at some of the best teams, they all seem to score the same goal most weeks. And that goal, that second one that you've spoken about, is a modern day finish, essentially. You've got a wide forward who's come inside, a midfielder who's bombing on, breaking a line and cutting the ball back. And if it's not your number 9 scoring, then it should be your other wide forward tapping it into the back post. And you think of your Raheem Sterlings of the world, who's basically made a career on that. And I think Iliman Ndiaye is quite similar in a way. I think he's a lot more skillful than Sterling, maybe not as quick. But what he does have is that nous to get in at the back stick. And if it's not Beto, then it's Ndiaye. And if it's not Beto and Grealish, then you've got other players who are chipping in, hence the third goal, really. So, listen, having quality who can get on the score sheet is never going to be a bad thing, is it really? And that's what we've sorely missed over the past few years. I can't think of a time we've had 2 players score over 10 goals in a season. But if you look at Ndiaye, Beto, and maybe 1 or 2 of that other front 4 or 5, then you could easily have those numbers being hit this season. So it's of course exciting. And listen, I don't think Dewsbury Hall and Jack Grealish need to play together for too long, because quality understands quality, doesn't it? And when them two start linking up, it's going to be something that's easy to come by, hopefully. And it's obviously great to see.
Yeah, it's initially early days. I mean, it looks like the club have got it right with transfers. It looks like there is a plan in place. But, you know, just before we move on to talk about transfers around the game, John, I think we've always wanted, and now for a while, especially since the scattergun Mashiri days of transfer policy, we've wanted a plan. We've wanted a structure in place. And you mentioned in your opening about the fact that you feel that Everton have got that now, or we're heading that way. But I know people, I'm going to go back to, you know, the players we potentially didn't sign in terms of the positions we've mentioned in right back, and, you know, that replacement eventually that we'll need for Idrissa Gana Gueye. But this was never going to happen in one window, was it? I mean, it was such a big job with all the players who left in the summer to replace them, but also not just replace them with quality. And I think that Everton have made a good start to this, but you'd hope now this is the start of one window where we go into future windows and we already know our targets. We can already get them in place and, you know, get the players in and get them in early, which just helps everyone all around. But it did feel a little bit like that, John, didn't it? It did feel like we're on the way now to having a bit of substance in our recruitment.
Yeah, I mean, we saw at the beginning, the first target we went for was Kenny Tete. Now, we didn't get Tete, and I'm not really that fussed about Tete. I think he's a good Premier League player, but it shows you the kind of transfer mindset that now exists within the recruitment team. We didn't get Tete. We you know, there was Evertonians, and I was one of myself saying, well, there's someone we can buy, but that's not the right idea. I mean, you know, you look at the players who've gone. Yeah, Kyle Walker-Peters. You know, he's been playing at Southampton for the last 5-6 years. I don't think he'd be good enough for us. I don't think, you know, they were mentioning Ainsley Maitland-Niles, players like that. So I'd rather we didn't sign someone. We've got enough cover there in O'Brien, Coleman, and Garner to get us through the season, all through till January, and buy that right player. Now, somebody was saying we've had there's a Moroccan kid at Real Sociedad who we had the bid turned down for, and I think we might be going back in for him in January. So that'll be interesting because I think it also fits that profile of young, quick attacking players, which, you know, I think Asnu eventually may be that left back that we're looking for, and I think they want that kind of pace in transitioning that we haven't had for years. You know, when we've been attacking, it's been so mind-numbingly slow at times, and you know, we've had dice ball, we've had whatever Lampard's tactics were. Not that I can't remember, I just didn't see them. So, you know, we now look like we've got a plan there, and even, you know, to give a bit of credit to Thelwell, bringing in they deal to bring in Ndai, and after basically with the Anthony Gordon money, he's just nothing short of sensational. We've got a player there who plays for the team, has skill, maybe a little bit lacking in his final ball, but for me, he's infinitely better than Anthony Gordon because Anthony Gordon's only playing for Anthony Gordon.
Just to nip,
go on,
Warren.
Please do.
Again, just thoughts as John's speaking there is that I'm thinking of this window where people are probably and ahhing whether to come to Everton. I think David Moyes has made that clear in a number of his press conferences, really saying like, oh, this person didn't want to come, or the Liam Delap situation where they've basically gone out to the public and said, we want you if you fancy it, and he's chose elsewhere. But come January, if you look around at that Everton squad, you've got Jack Grealish, Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, you've got Jordan Pickford, you've got Jared Branthwaite, you've got Iliman Ndiaye. Players are going to be thinking, I want to go and play for them. When was the last time you could say that?
Exactly, yeah.
And I feel like if we weren't paying major wages to get people through the door, then we probably weren't getting them. Whereas now you can probably say, listen, this is what our offer is. We've got a team who are hopefully on the up. And it's your chance to come and play in a side that is only going one way, really. So it just feels like, and I know we've come a long way from Leeds, and we are fickle as football fans, that a couple of good results can turn us into a top 4 side instead of a bottom 4 side. But at the same time, it just seems to me like there's a number of moving parts here which are all moving in the right direction and seem to be moving as a well-oiled machine, really. So again, from a club that's got a brand new home, that's got some really exciting players, all the way through to a structure now, which is if this person doesn't accept the wages that we're offering, if this person doesn't like the contract we're offering, then we're not going to offer it to him, and that's a breath of fresh air for me.
Absolutely. And I think one of the many things that the Jack Grealish transfer has brought to us is that perception that Everton, like you just said there, Adam, is a club that is attractive again. You know, I think that we heard Moyes say in one of the press conferences, didn't he, that because we can't offer European football, for instance, that we're maybe not the proposition that we want to be, or we potentially could be in the future. But I think the sign of Jack Grealish, I mean, there must be players up and down the country looking at him and thinking, he's made such a fantastic start. He's loving his football again, and he's playing, you know, real high level as well, and showing us and showing everyone what he's all about. And I think definitely that's going to change the perception of us going forward. Fingers crossed, hopefully in future transfer windows as well. As I mentioned, it was a busy summer of transfers, and you know, wild spending from everyone, and there were winners and losers on both sides. And you know, I'm loath to talk about Liverpool too much on an Everton podcast, but obviously they hit the headlines with all the signings they made, and I think some other clubs up and down the country have made some really good purchases and good buys. I know in particular, Adam, you were impressed with, if I come back to you, were impressed with the business Sunderland have done.
Yeah, I feel like, again, I said it on the weekly we did last, Warren, in terms of those 3 that are coming into the league. And you've seen it in previous years where you can almost pick out which of those teams are going to have a real go and try and stay up, or those that are kind of reluctant to spend the money because they've almost accepted the fate. And if they do hand out big contracts to Premier League quote unquote players, then it could come to a head really when they do go back down. And I feel like Leeds have spent the money. I think Burnley maybe haven't so. but I definitely think Sunderland have. But I'm more impressed with Sunderland's business than I am with Leeds, really. I think the likes of Habib Diarra and Simon Adingra, Granit Xhaka, of course. There's a few other names in there that I feel could turn them into a Premier League side. And again, you've got to put your eggs in one basket if you are going to try and stay in the league. And I feel like Sunderland have probably got the best chance out of those three to do so. But again, it all comes down to a couple of bad results. How do you bounce back from that? A couple of injuries. AFCON is going to be massive for a number of teams this season, really. So, yeah, there's been some really good business around the league, some poor business around the league. But again, it just seems like everyone's spending the money. And if it goes well for people, then great. But if you look at Aston Villa this season, if you don't finish one place above on goal difference, then you're pretty hamstrung for the rest of the year, aren't you, really? So give it a go, and if you do, then yeah, of course, the money's well spent.
I think Aston Villa is actually, and ironically, they're our next opponents at the Hill Dickinson. I think Aston Villa are a really interesting case because they've had, as you mentioned, Adam, a really good couple of seasons, and got into Champions League, finished quite high up in the league, and whatever. And I'm just looking at their signings here, John. Jadon Sancho on loan, I think it is, from United. Harvey Elliott signed from Liverpool, and Victor Lindelof as well. And I look at them three players, and I think to myself, if you just swapped our transfer business with Aston Villa's and we'd have got those three players in, I don't think you would have had a lot of happy Evertonians, would you know what I mean? They don't exactly inspire you, them three signings. And it does just prove again, doesn't it, that you've got to do things right in this window. And if you can bolster your squad with a couple of decent players, it can make all the difference. But I'm looking at someone like Villa and I'm not entirely impressed there. Are you?
I don't think Harvey Elliott's a bad signing. As much as it loads me to say it, because he is one of the most loathsome footballers on the scene at the moment. I don't like his hair. I don't like his family. I don't like his general existence. No, but no, there's those racist posts from his mum, wasn't there? That he was
allegedly.
So, well, yeah, but they were there. But I think he's a good footballer, and I think he brings something that they haven't. I mean, they got Tielemans, who's a very good player, but he's capable of disappearing. And I think Harvey Elliott's got that little bit more fight than any of their midfielders. But as for Lindelof and Sancho, that just reeks of Everton in the years gone by. Any Man United detritus that's there, we'll have. There was certainly we had that. We've had that, haven't we? From John O'Kane to Jesper Blomqvist. All the way through to like Morgan Schneiderlin. If the United are selling, we'll buy, because we just seem to think that anything they touch is a great player, but it's not always that case. And I think that's certainly the case with Sancho. Sancho I think he's one of those players he's a FIFA player, if you know what I mean. He's great on the game, but in real life, it doesn't always apply. No, but he might benefit more from the management style of Unai Emery, though. But Lindelof, that's even lower than being underwhelmed, isn't it? It's just
it feels like just a signing to get bodies in, doesn't it? It feels like just to get another body. I mean, he may turn out to be a useful signing and a useful player, but it feels very much like we need numbers. Let's get somebody in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's just he's been part of the United downfall for about he's been at United about 8-9 years, and United have got progressively worse every season that he's been in. Now, I'm not saying that's solely down to him, but he has been part of it. So, but again, Villa it's the unfairness of the whole PSR system. It's not a system to stop it was brought in to stop another Leeds, another Valencia, another things like that. But in reality, it's just that it just puts that glass ceiling in that you can't break. And Villa have been victims of their own success, and it's an unfair system, and it's designed just to keep the cabal in their own, where they believe to be their rightful place.
Yeah, I mean, looking at them at some of the other clubs around the Premier League who've made, had some business, this summer. I mean, I look at Bournemouth, for instance, who sold most of their defence this year. They've raised around 200 million in selling, Houston to Real Madrid, and obviously Kirk's going to Liverpool, and they've only brought in a couple of players, but they already, with the start of the season, they've made look like they're fantastic. And if we're looking for the future, I mean, I'd certainly wouldn't turn my nose up at getting Iraola in as manager if Moyes left in the next couple of years, like we think he may. And then I look at teams like Brentford who, you know, I mean, they've just had what looks like a really poor summer on paper. I know they've had a win recently, but, you know, they lost the captain in Christine Norgard, and then obviously Brian Mbeumo went to Man United, and then Johan Wiss has gone to Newcastle, as well as Thomas Frank leaving the club. So I think there's winners and losers everywhere, isn't there? But just one more point, if I could, Adam, before you talk about a few of those, is they always say, don't they, that you need the most money and you need this, and money obviously does help in a situation. But I think if you look at Leeds, for instance, Leeds have spent, I think, just under 12-15 million less than us. And for the same amount of money, bar that 10-15 million, whatever it is, they've not brought in a lot of similar quality to what Everton have. Everton have spent similar money and brought in what I consider a lot bigger quality than Leeds. So it does prove, doesn't it, that it's not always about money, it's about being sensible, which clubs like Bournemouth have proven.
Yeah, definitely. And the likes of your Bournemouth and Brentfords and Brightons of the world, I call them like system clubs, really. You can have a cookie cutter approach to the type of player that you want, and they'll find some random South American or Eastern European player that just slots straight in. And again, that's great. And I do think there is horses for courses with certain levels of clubs. And I said it towards the back end of last season, is that these clubs should be nowhere near Everton. They're nowhere near in stature. They're nowhere near in history. They haven't got the fan base. And granted, they haven't got the pressure that Everton Football Club has, really. But that's not to say that they aren't performing better over the past 6-7 years, essentially. And for me, I like Iraola. I think he's a good gaffer. I just worry about him if he did come to Everton, that you can't have that cookie cutter approach to playing football, regardless of whether it's working or not. And you almost have to have as little pressure as possible when you are in those types of clubs. I think Brighton's obviously the perfect example. And I think a lot of Brighton fans go the game to go the game. Everton fans go the game to win. It's a massive, massive difference for me, because when you're not winning, you'll feel it. And when you aren't winning at Brighton, it's about trusting the process. And a lot of the time, the process does work. But that's not to say that Everton should be taken for granted some of the players that are coming through at these clubs, because the recruitment teams are obviously really successful. But for me, in the next couple of years, I expect it to almost even out in terms of who should be in and around that top 6 to 10, really. And Everton should be one of those teams. Aston Villa should be one of those teams. Tottenham should as well. I like the way Crystal Palace operate. I think they're probably a middle ground in between your Brentfords and Brightons and your Evertons and Villas. But again, money isn't everything. But you can have no money and sign well, and you can have lots of money and sign well. It's about getting a system and a plan together. And if you've got the same manager for the next 3 or 4 years, then you're probably going to sign players that suit his system. And Everton have been victims of signing 3 or 4 players for one manager, 3 or 4 for another manager, 3 or 4 for the next one. And how are you going to create any synergy when that's your recruitment process, really? So if we're all in on Moyes, or we're all in on Moyes' successor, it has to be a similar way of playing. And that's exactly what Brighton and Brentford and Bournemouth do. And who knows, Keith Andrew could get sacked by Christmas. But at the same time, he's got a club there that is basically doing everything else but the coaching for him. Is that the Everton way? I don't necessarily know. Is football going that way? Possibly. But again, it's a whole different ballgame when you walk into the Hill Dickinson Stadium than you do the Amex.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually, because obviously you look at the results and you look at how Bournemouth play and you look at the players they brought through and you think you automatically go, the manager's excellent. And like you said, it may work for him in that situation and that style. I mean, I'm really interested to see how Thomas Frank, for instance, works at Spurs. And I know he started off well and then he had that result, ironically, against Bournemouth where they lost. But I'd be interested to see how he does there, because I actually am of the belief that I think Thomas Frank's an excellent manager, and it'll be interesting to see if the approach that Spurs have, being a bigger club than Brentford, whether that will work for Spurs as it did at Brentford. And obviously, we'll wait and see what happens with that. We are going to move on now to talk about something that I know I was aware of at the weekend. And obviously, as you know, lads, it's been a really poor start from a refereeing point of view. I think it's been really weak refereeing. I don't think that's too harsh to say. I don't think that's too much of a controversial statement to make. I think we are, without a doubt, seeing now probably the weakest set of referees. And I don't mean weak as in not being able to make a decision. I mean just making consistently poor decisions. And obviously, I'm sure many of the listeners and yourselves would have seen the Fulham goal that got disallowed against Chelsea, where young Josh King, who's 18, we think scored on his debut and scored his first ever goal in professional football. And he's got it turned away because someone in Stockley Park's decided that the referee should go and re-referee the game and watch that again. And I've become a little bit disinterested, and I've always been against VAR anyway. I've always not wanted really that level of technology in football. I think that to have it as pure as it was and it can be, it needs to be without that. And I know VAR was brought in. I know particularly you, John, have got this belief that it's not necessarily VAR, it's the people in charge of it, which we're going to talk about. But I just want to bring up a comment that I read from Scott Parker over the weekend. Obviously, Burnley had Man United, and they were the victims of a poor decision with Man United getting a penalty that was probably not really a penalty, probably could have been in some cases, not in others. And Scott Parker said this, he said, football is going to become the most sterile game there is. We're probably months or a year away from not celebrating goals. I stand on the touchline, you score a goal, and you feel like there's a million things that go through your mind. And I've been there myself, I'm sure we all have, where you've seen a goal go in and you don't know whether to celebrate because it might look offside, it might look be this, and you don't want to look stupid. And we have celebrated goals as Everton fans, which ultimately have been disallowed. And I read that comment from Scott Parker, John, and I actually think he's on the money there. I mean, is football becoming this robotic, formulaic sport that's just not enjoyable on the eye anymore?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's, but VAR is, but it's just one facet of the game. It's the whole game itself. It's VAR is playing a massive part on it. The microscopic referee and the forensic detail they go into. They're not looking to allow the game to flow. They're looking for reasons to disallow the goal. Now, you take, for example, James Tarkowski's equaliser against Liverpool last season. It was clear after the first replay. There was no offside. There was no foul. It was a goal. Yet they took 6 minutes to determine that when the first viewing told you that. And that indicates that they're not looking for anything obvious. They're looking for the most minute thing that they can find to disallow the goal. It's against what football is, but it's symptomatic of modern football. Football itself becoming now, I've railed against it lots, but things like XG and the dribble thing and that, and just expected dribbles, it's just football. The only statistic that matters is the score at the end of the game. And I know some of it is great it's used for determining how far players run, but at the end of the day, some of our best players didn't run 11 kilometres a game, 12 kilometres a game, but they scored. Bob Latford must have, from what my dad told me, he must have run sometimes maybe less than 2 or 3 kilometres a game, but he'd come away with a hat-trick and we'd win. And ultimately, that's the biggest factor. And VAR is just another symptom of the game, and it's run by idiots, basically. We put Howard Webb in charge. Does anyone watch his VAR review with him and Michael Owen?
I can't bring myself to watch it, but however, what the clips I've seen in the past, I'm fine with referees making mistakes because we're all human and we can all make mistakes. And do you know what? I'd even go as far to say, lads, as well, the fellas in Stockley Park who choose to bring stuff back in that moment and under that pressure, they may feel that something should be given. And I'm all accepting of mistakes being made.
Yeah.
What I don't appreciate, and I think Howard Webb for me falls under this, is the accountability when there is a mistake. Now, Fulham got an apology, but so what? So what does that do what does that even mean? They can't replay the game. The goal doesn't come back for Fulham.
No, it puts Fulham first place now in the Apology League this season, so they're doing well. But you watch
you joke. You joke about it, but it's the lack of accountability and the lack of we got this wrong and the lack of responsibility taken. And Howard Webb is at the top of that, which for me, I mean, I don't want to go down the whole refereeing discussion here. It's more about the product on the pitch, but it is becoming that way, isn't it?
Howard Webb's comments about this Fulham goal were, it's not controversial, it's a misjudgment. I mean, it is controversial, Howard. And the fact is, he is now in charge of the PGMOL. And for all his high profile, Howard Webb was a terrible referee. So how can the game improve if you've got terrible referees in charge, dictating policy. Now, I think there's a couple of half-decent referees there who, given the chance, away from the shackles of all these ridiculous laws, like Muniz made a careless challenge. It's utterly insane. It's becoming far too bogged down with minutiae now. It's a simple game, football. Let it be played. That's all it is.
I feel that just to probably strip it back more than rules and tactics and people making decisions from 200 miles away, it's robbing us of moments, isn't it? Really? And
yeah.
Again, I always go back.
Point.
I've mentioned this numerous times on the Blue Room over the years, but the first one that almost caught me off guard was the Calvert-Lewin one against Man United. I think it was just before COVID, where Gylfi Sigurdsson sat on the floor, Calvert-Lewin scores, and then this is this VAR thing that they've brought in, which is taken 4 minutes to determine whether Gylfi Sigurdsson, who was sat down, was in the eye line of 6'5" David De Gea, I think it was at the time.
Was, yeah.
And I thought absolutely ballistic in the park end there, falling all over everyone, 90-odd minute winner to beat Manchester United. And at the time, I think it might have taken us second or third in the league under Ancelotti. 5 minutes later, you've got an away end that are all laughing at you. And since then, I've very rarely jumped up and down unless it's a penalty, unless it's a direct free kick, or unless someone's whacked it from 45 yards and no one's in the way of the keeper, really. And how often does that happen as an Evertonian? And that, for me, is the saddest part of this. And again, we can argue till the cows come home about who's in control. Are we letting the referees make a decision or not? Is it someone in Stockley Park getting it wrong, or is it VAR that's just, again, trying to take too much of a shine off this beautiful game that we all love watching? It's the fact that Everton have scored goals over the years that I've been sat at home for, sat in the pub, sat in the ground for, and I haven't even moved a muscle. And that's the saddest part, really. And every single football fan agrees with that. And if you're not going to be able to get the people in who make the right decisions on the technology, because listen, I work in technology myself. I think it's brilliant. I think it can help. But if you put me in control of it every single day, it's probably going to fall over. But if you put referees who weren't great at their job anyway, or you get people who've never played the game or never refereed the game before, sat in a truck, that's where you're going to get the inconsistency. So it's one or the other. You either have to make it fully automated, so there's no human involvement, or you bin it and go back to this off the cuff, just any given moment, a goal can be scored or a red card could be given, or the ball might be out, but you don't know because the linesman's blocked it. I don't care what anyone says. That's what we love. We love that. We love listening to managers after the game moaning about refereeing decisions that were just made there and then. Now we're just moaning about this robot that seems to control everyone's emotions. And that, for me, is the saddest part, really. And it will turn into FIFA. It will turn into the fact that I've seen a few goals recently where they score, everyone celebrates, it goes to VAR, they get laughed at by the home end or away end, and then they give it, and then there's like a double celebration. Everyone will stop doing that first celebration and just wait for the second one. And it's like rugby then, isn't it? You get to a point where you just go like, oh, I think that's a try, or I think that's a goal. We'll have to wait for the decision. And you never jump up and down as much as you do for the second celebration as you do for the first. And as Scott Parker says, it'll get to the point where we become robots because we're getting controlled by them.
Yeah, I was reading, we had a discussion actually last season about the fact that the TV ratings, they reckon, and football viewership has gone down by, I think, 20%. I mean, I plucked that figure from the top of my head. That could be really wrong, so I shouldn't have said that. But they reckon it's some sort of high figure that there's a concern. And I think there's multiple reasons for that. I mean, I personally think the way that some of the teams try to play, I mean, Pep Guardiola gets accused of bringing this style of football in and everyone's copied. But he's not at fault for everyone playing the way he likes to play. But saying that, I think that the way people and the way clubs play nowadays, I mean, I watched Rangers and Celtic on Sunday and I was really looking forward to like the first Old Firm derby. Thought, this will be a good game. And, we talk about sterile. It was just, I mean, two teams afraid to lose, but also two teams just trying to play a certain way and it not really resulting in anything. And I think a lot of clubs are trying to do that. And before I go off on a big tangent about this, I think that coupled with the VAR and what's been happening recently and the points you made there, Adam, I think they're all adding together to mean that people are just switching off and it's not being as exciting. I mean, you get the odd game, of course you do, which is great to watch, but they seem to be fewer and far between now, which is, a real shame. But, hopefully down the line, these things will eventually sort themselves out, and we'll get a game, or we'll get, watching things that certainly are more exciting. Listen, who's not more exciting at the minute than watching Everton play? Because we're full of goals, full of attack and play, full of everything, and we look brilliant on the ice. So long may that continue. Just before we wrap up the show, I have got to give a shout out, by the way, to a friend of mine called Mitchell. Now, Mitchell is based in near Kansas City in the United States, which I have been to on holiday, and I used to live there and different things. And Mitchell sorted me out a couple of tickets to the baseball, and he is a massive Blue Room fan and also a massive Evertonian as well. So I did say I'd give him a shout out and a thank you for sorting me them tickets. So Mitchell, hope you're listening, and what a start to the season. Hopefully see you again soon. So I just wanted to get that out there, but we will wrap it up there, as I say, for this week's weekly. My thanks to John and to Adam. We did have we tried to record last night and we had a few technical issues, so we've recorded again. So I'm especially grateful to the lads for giving up their time again.
Thank God for VAR.
Yeah, thank God for technology working, absolutely. But keep us listening to the Blue Room. If you are watching us on YouTube, give us a subscribe. I think we're over 5,000 subs now, which is absolutely amazing. Give us a subscribe and that'll pop up in your YouTube feeds. And also, if you access us via your podcasts, whatever that may be, whether that be Android, whether that be Apple, whatever, Google, whatever it might be, if you give us a follow on there as well, every time a new podcast gets dropped, you will get that instantly onto your phone and you'll be able to listen to us. And every little thing like that really does help us grow and become bigger and become what we are. So that would be amazing help if everyone could do that for us. But we will leave it there. My thanks again to John and Adam. We've got international break this weekend, so no Everton, but we'll be back next week with a preview for the Villa game. The lads will be back with Blue Monday and with the byline. And keep your ears listened to the Blue Room for all your Everton content. Thanks again, and up the Toffees. We'll speak to you soon.